The following is a full interview from the Border Battle with King and CJ. Tune into the Border Battle Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 11 to noon on Suddenlink Channel 112, YouTube Live, or OSU Student Radio KXZY. Studio 318 here in the Paul Miller Journalism Building. You're listening to the Border Battle with King and CJ on KXZY Oklahoma State Student Radio, Suddenlink Channel 112, YouTube Live, Border Battle on Demand, and Facebook.com/Border Battle Show. I'm King, he's CJ. Between us, we have the voice of the Cowboys, football and basketball, Dave Hunziker. Dave, thanks for taking out a couple minutes and joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting day, it's to say the least.
So what was your first initial reaction when you saw Oklahoma pop up on the board and then the next team was not Oklahoma State?
Well, I was in the room of the players, and the big thing was it was about as bad of a mood as you could see. I mean, it was just quiet, and guys obviously thought they were going to be in. It's, some of it I understand. I don't understand how you can ignore the last part of a season. That I don't get, whether you put Oklahoma State or anyone else ahead of Oklahoma. I mean, you play the tournament in March, right? And anyone who follows basketball or is involved in basketball understands that the most grueling part of your season, where you find out how good you really are, is in conference play, when every team knows when you blow your nose, which nostril it comes out of, and how much is coming out. They know everything about you. So that challenges you in a whole different way. Now the committee suddenly says the games in November and December are of equal value. I don't know anybody in basketball that would ever agree with that. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, the reason why they did that is because of the unbalanced conference schedules. The Big 12 is the anomaly now, playing the double round robin. So if you're in the Big 10, for example, you could catch a couple of hard games on the road at the back end of your conference schedule just by luck. Bad luck. I understand that. But that doesn't apply to Oklahoma. They play a double round robin. I just don't, and it's no disrespect to the Sooners, I just don't get it. That part of it, I just don't understand. And again, whether you decide it's Oklahoma State that should be in, or St. Mary's, or whoever you want to advocate for, suddenly what's happened to me is they've said conference play doesn't matter anymore. Well then, wow. Yeah, it does matter. And it's funny because we've gone the flip side of football. Football, they keep saying conference championships matter. Now they're saying to me conference championships don't matter at all. It's just strange. And that you would take Kansas and put them as a 1 seed with 2 losses to Oklahoma State, that kind of blows my mind. It's like, well, wait a second. Those are bad losses now, right? You lost to a team that didn't make the tournament. Those are bad losses, but they're a 1 seed. Some of it puzzles me. I don't proclaim, though, to be an expert and complain too much because they study it. They work hard at it. Not going to sit here and just go crazy on it. Needed to win one more game if you're Oklahoma State. You're probably in pretty good shape. What happened is, then I promise I'll be done. What happened is you got into this game of RPI ping pong in late January, early February. You'd win at Kansas. You go to Kansas like it's 105 in the RPI. Then you win that game, and you're up to like 88. Okay, good shape. Then you come home, and you play Baylor, and you lose, and you're right back down to 98. And you've gotten this RPI ping pong because you couldn't string wins together, and so the next thing you know, you're sitting there at the end of the year, and you're 90th in the RPI, and there's a lot involved with that in terms of the scheduling. We could get into that, but I feel bad for the guys. I mean, you'd think if you sweep Kansas, you'd be in, but obviously the committee felt like non-conference strength of schedule, despite saying a month ago that they didn't think it was all that important. Now suddenly it is, and you got to have some consistency, I guess.
Well, especially for like the Big 12. I mean, you can make this strength of schedule argument for non-con, but if you're playing an RPI 125 and then you're playing an RPI 25 and you're playing Duke, but then you get a cupcake, and then you're playing North Carolina, you have these, whereas in the Big 12, it's game after game after game. You mentioned going and playing Baylor back at home. Shouldn't Oklahoma State get some reward for the grueling schedule that is the Big 12?
Well, you would think. I mean, and another problem I have is, and again, it's easy for me to sit here and say this. I'm not in the committee because they do a good job and they work really hard at it and they take pride in it. And I've got a summer project. I'm going to dig into the analytics hard, and I'm going to try to find as many basketball people as I can find to find different opinions on, do the analytics work? I'm going to look for ones that have kind of a thorn in the side over them, or I'm going to dig into them. I need to learn more because obviously I don't understand them as well as I should. I didn't going into it, and so it'd be good to learn more. And I just want to see how it all works really in detail. But let's take Oklahoma State's unique circumstance. So the committee says you've got to play a good non-conference schedule, that Oklahoma State didn't expose themselves enough in the non-conference. You're Mike Boynton. You're a first-year head coach coming into a very volatile situation where fans are angry. Underwood's bolted after a year. You're in your third head coach in 3 years. You've got a very upset, frustrated fan base. If I were in his shoes, quite candidly, I'd have a hard time loading up and playing a bunch of really hard mid-majors, because my thought is I've got to have traction. I've got to have credibility with the fans, because here's the deal. TCU plays Nevada, St. Bonaventure, Belmont, all top 80 teams, all good programs. I mean, Rick Byrd at Belmont's one of the best coaches nobody knows about in America. The problem for Mike Boynton is if he schedules Belmont, and it's a great game to play, but they come in here and beat Oklahoma State, under the circumstances he's under, his credibility takes a downward jump immediately. Unfairly so, but the fans don't know Belmont's good. They don't know that. They don't know St. Bonaventure's any good. No matter, John Holcomb and I could talk till our air runs out of our lungs. They don't know they're any good. So if he schedules those people and he gets beat, he's in a bad PR situation. So he needed to schedule some wins. At the end of the day, it was a whole bunch of unique circumstances that kind of came into play. They had some good non-conference games. They played Wichita State here. It's a good non-con. Florida State and Miami is a good non-con game to play. Tulsa turned out to be better than what we would have thought. A&M, and frankly, A&M is not nearly as good as everybody thought they were going to be. Everybody thought going in they were a Final Four team, and early in the year when they were on, they looked like one. West Virginia would tell you that after the opener. So it's just a lot of things that came into play, but I guess Coach Boynton's unique circumstances, I wish they would have given him a little bit, and maybe they did, benefit of the doubt on, you look at their circumstances are pretty unique. And they also said, Bruce Rasmussen told the Omaha World Herald about 3 weeks ago, talking about the non-conference strength of schedule, that, for example, Nebraska didn't need to go play the same non-conference teams that Michigan State did to prove its worth, because that's not reasonable for Nebraska to do. It's reasonable for Michigan State to do it. They go play a bunch of teams 200 and above. They're like, what the heck are you doing? Nebraska plays a couple above 200, and they sprinkle in some in the top 50 and top 75. That's okay for them. So it didn't seem to me that Oklahoma State got that benefit of the doubt out of that as much as I would have expected based on what Bruce Rasmussen, the committee chair, had said a month ago to the Omaha World Herald. It really caught me off guard.
So obviously we know it was hard for the players to see their name, the team not being picked. Do you think the reaction would maybe have been less painful if OU wasn't picked?
Sure, I think so. And you never know. OU's a 10 seed, good grief, and they're playing a Rhode Island team. It really hasn't been playing that well lately, so that'll be interesting. Yeah, I think so. They beat them 2 out of 3 times. They'd just beaten them. I don't like how they pulled the brackets out. I'm old school on anything anyway. I'm not much for change, so I shouldn't speak to that. But yeah, I think it made it worse. The first thing that caught my attention when Baylor was out. And here's another. Now, let's be honest. Baylor swept Oklahoma State, but when Baylor was out, I thought, okay, here we go. We're good. And it took me a minute in that new format to figure that out. It's like they put the next sheet up, and I looked up. It's like, oh, crud, Baylor's out. We should be good. Not so fast. There was some school of thought. I talked to a national basketball analyst Saturday night who sent me some direct messages on Twitter, and he said, and he's very blunt with me, he said, Dave, you're off base. You're not getting in. He's just honest. It's not going to happen. And it's like, oh. Then we had a nice, tete-a-tete about why or why not. But I think there's some perception out there that the Big 12 at the top is really not as good as people think. Kansas with a thin team is able to win the league. And, we know how limited they were and how they had to play small, not playing the way Bill Self normally wants to play. So I think there's a perception, and it may be accurate, that the league is not that good. And so what can help Oklahoma State and everyone else, and especially Oklahoma State being left out, the best thing to do is the league to go crazy in the tournament, put 2 or 3 in the Sweet 16, a couple in the Elite 8, and prove them wrong. Because I think that's the perception. I think that's the perception that maybe hurt Oklahoma State deep down. I think the committee said, we're not convinced the Big 12 is that good. And the tournament performance by the league in recent history has not been very good.
Can you make an argument? I don't know how much of an eye test guy you are, but I mean, you look at Oklahoma State and the way they've played against some of the toughest teams, even in losses against at Arkansas, on neutral floor against Florida State, and some of the way they've played, even in a loss at Texas Tech, they arguably should have won that game. About the eye test compared to RPI, because I think back to last season, I'm a Wisconsin guy, and when Wisconsin, their RPI sucked last year. It wasn't a great RPI, and they got stuck on the 8 line, and a lot of Wisconsin fans complained about it. Well, Villanova kind of got screwed because they had to play Wisconsin in the second game of the tournament. But Oklahoma State doesn't get to prove that. You know, they didn't get in to prove that they should have been in. But how much do you take eye test into it, or should eye test be taken into it?
I think it should. I look at it a little bit differently, and because it seems to me that they almost loop all the Quadrant 1 games together. We were 5-12 against Quadrant 1. Here's what I would say. You know, the chancellor at UNC Asheville, and I don't mean to pick on UNC Asheville. I love UNC Asheville. They were in my league at Radford. I have great friends at UNC Asheville. We'll just use them as an example. Tell your coach to take their team to the Allen Fieldhouse and find out how difficult it is. The level of difficulty of winning in the Allen Fieldhouse for anybody in basketball is astronomically high and almost impossible. Ask Huggins. He's never won there. I mean, he's been in position to win there 3 or 4 times. He never won. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. That is an issue I have a little bit, is I don't know that they really have. One thing I did when I got home from the conference tournament, just for fun, just what happens when you think about this 24/7, is I took the teams on the bubble in the Big 12, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Texas, Baylor. I went through their whole conference schedule and assigned a point value to every game they played, up to +10 or down to -10, and graded all their games based on that. So for Oklahoma State, for example, the Kansas game was +10. That's the max. Now, the TCU game, I think at home, the Baylor game they lost at home was like -7 or -7.5. And I added up all those values, and I tried to be objective. And people are laughing, saying, yeah, that's real funny. But I really tried hard to be fair about it. Oklahoma State had the best plus-minus in that because of those quality wins. But I just don't think the committee gets into that. You hope they do. Maybe they do. I'm not in the room. I shouldn't say that. But obviously they don't they don't judge those maybe as much as we would think. Let's just say it that way. I don't think it carries as much weight as you might think.
So obviously, you said the Big 12 maybe has something to prove for March Madness. Does Oklahoma State have something to prove now in the NIT? Is it something maybe they'll play with an edge now because they were left out?
I wish that were true. I could sit here and tell you that's true, but it's not. I mean, because nobody's paying attention. Nobody's paying attention. To me, the motivation for the NIT is simple. This is just me, in my opinion. And you've got to find something to make you want to play. And you can use that for an edge, but that kind of stuff tends to wear off after a while anyway. You got to get Coach Boynton back to New York. If those players love him as much as they do, and I know they do, he grew up in Brooklyn. He used to go to the Garden and watch the Knicks. He loves the Knicks. It would be a great way for the players to cap off the year to get him home to coach in the Garden. Oklahoma State's a team that actually has something like that they can hang their hat on from the NIT. Most teams are going through the motions. I hope they embrace that, because you can go to the point-to-prove thing, but here's the deal. Do you really prove a point? No, and nobody's paying attention anyway. I hate to say it, it's the truth. To me, get Coach home. That's the motivation. If you appreciate him, get him home.
Well, if you'd like to stick around for 5 more minutes.
I'll stick around.
Would you like
Heck
to?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. We'll talk a little bit more of the NIT, maybe a little Radford talk, your former school that you did play-by-play at. We'll talk a little bit about them. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're listening to The Border Battle on OSU Student Radio KXCY. Welcome back into Studio 318 here in the Paul Miller Journalism Building at Oklahoma State University. We're going to forego some Tiger Woods talk. Tiger, he looked like old Tiger. A couple glimpses of old Tiger, I think, yesterday afternoon. We're going to forego that and stick with Dave. He's willing to stick around. Thank you so much for sticking for a second segment. The voice of Cowboy football and basketball to most. For those lucky enough, professor to some of us, so I was lucky enough to take his announcing class last semester and enjoyed that a great deal. So thanks again for sticking around for a few more minutes.
Oh, absolutely. It's an interesting time. Florida Gulf Coast, if you want to jump into that, I think style-wise it's a good matchup for Oklahoma State. They want to play fast. They want to press. And Oklahoma State thrives in broken court situations. That's why they beat West Virginia. That's why they beat Kansas twice. So it comes down to, and Florida Gulf Coast is a really good team, but I think it's a really good matchup style-wise. If they were a grinder team that played the gaps defensively and played slow, then you'd really be worried. So it really comes down to, I think, where are they at mentally? The first game's the hardest. Once you start playing, it kind of becomes routine. That first game, the shock of not being in the NCAA field, trying to recover from that pretty quickly, we'll see. But I think matchup-wise, if they can, and it's hard to do, if they can get their minds ready to go, easier said than done. If they can do that, then I think it's a good matchup. And then I think you get past the first game, it could get fun.
Kendall Smith, Mitchell Solomon, Jeffrey Carroll, last crack at it for those guys. What response, knowing them better than the average Cowboy fan, what response do you expect out of those guys? I
think the big thing is I think they like Coach Boynton so much. I think they're going to want to play hard for him. I think they'd love to get him back to New York City to coach. And I think they're responsible people. I mean, they're guys that, they understand that in life you just can't shut it down. I mean, we've had teams here where they did. I mean, we got beat by Marist in here, whatever that was, 11 years ago. I mean, holy moly, we were in a bad place mentally. But that team in 07 collapsed at the end of the year. I mean, really collapsed at the end of the year. And so you could kind of see that one coming a little bit. In 08, you had the same type circumstances where teams struggled at the end of the year, and it was becoming clear that there could be a coaching change involved, so that wasn't very good. So many times you go into the NIT, not playing well and just kind of searching, and then players just kind of mail it in. This is different. This team's been playing well, and they had the motivation, I think, of trying to get Coach back home. So because I look at those other years, 06, we weren't playing well at the end of the year. 07, we had a little spark in the tournament, but generally just had gone from a top 10 team to the NIT. I think about Travis's NIT team in 2011. Now, that was a team probably more like this, and that team won a game. We beat Harvard here and then got beat by Washington State. Who knew that Clay Johnson was that good? We found out that night. He's really good. And in so you look at those circumstances, and they're all a little different. So I think playing well at the end helps. I think maybe, you just got to get your mind right.
So then, obviously, the game's tomorrow night, which is kind of unfortunate because weekday games, it's hard to get fans sometimes. Do you feel maybe with this, potentially being the last game, I guess, in GIA for the season for a lot of these seniors, is this something, maybe that as Cowboy fans we need to go in kind of one last hurrah to kind of, a proper send-off for everything that this team has done for us this year?
Well, I think so. And then, of course, if you win this game, you're going to be home again. And you might end up, if USC gets upset, playing a third home game. I put this out on Twitter because I think everybody needs a little motivation for this, even the fans. I mean, I had a buddy of mine sent me a text today, and he's a great fan. He said, hey, should I go to this thing, or are these guys, have they just mailed it in? I said, no, you need to go. We need to get Coach Boynton back to New York. That to me is a clear, if you appreciate what he's done and you like what he's done, and I know, he's still growing as a head coach. He's not the perfect product yet. You would not expect a first-year head coach to be that. But if you appreciate what he's done, appreciate who he is, then just go and support him. And this becomes all about getting him back to New York, create a home court advantage so that Florida Gulf Coast comes here and they feel it a little bit. And that may be the difference in the game. And if Stanford comes in here or BYU, they feel it. I think that's where you can help, is if you appreciate Coach Boynton, try to help him win a couple of games. And if nothing else, say, hey, I like Coach. I like what he's doing. We're going to grow with him. Let's do what we can to get him home to New York because we appreciate what he's trying to do. And we know he's learning, but we appreciate who he is and how he interacts with the fans.
So a quick word about your the former team school that you were at, Radford. They're in the tournament today.
Yeah.
were they ever? I believe you said they were. Did they go to the tournament once or twice when you were there?
Once, 1998. This was the 20th year anniversary of their trip, as a matter of fact, and they had a big reunion into January. I would have loved to have gone, but got to text back and forth with a bunch of the guys, and they've had some pretty good teams. And we won the league a lot when I was there. I think we won it in the regular season 2, if not 3 times, and we only got to the tournament once. That's the kind of the way the low majors work, and they get in the play-in game, which I wish they would have avoided that, but hit a shot of 3 at the buzzer to beat Liberty at home, and really enjoyed watching that and thrilled for them. Mike Jones has done a really good job there because they were coming off NCAA sanctions when he came in. That was embarrassing to think that the previous coach would actually get them into trouble, but it happened, and they've bounced back. Mike does a first-class job. They really guard. They play the gaps. They're a great offensive rebounding team. Do they have the horses to be that first 16 to beat a 1? Probably not dynamic enough offensively because they can struggle to score, but hey, they're happy to be there, and it's good for them as it's hard, and it's been a while, and they've had some tough times, so I'm really happy for them.
In your opinion, what's the mentality of a 16? Would you rather be in the play-in game to potentially win an NCAA tournament game, or be in the final 64 field?
I think it depends on your team a little bit. That's a really good question. I think it depends on your team. I think if you have a team that has some experience in the tournament and maybe is a team that has overcome some injuries, then to be honest, I don't know if you want to be in that play-in. I think you just want to go. And there have been some 16s recently, and sometimes, though, the play-in game, they seem to play well after the play-in game and they face a 1. But a lot of times you've been in that play-in game, you've got the number 1 overall seed or you got the number 2 overall seed, so that kind of stinks. But you've had some flashes where that 16 has played them tough. I mean, it's been a while since we've had a really, really tight one, but one of these years it's going to happen. Kansas could be a vulnerable team just because they're so limited in depth, and that scares you going into the tournament. I don't think it'll happen, but that always makes you a little bit leery.
Well, best of luck to Radford. I'm sure you're going to be excited to watch them
Oh,
play.
Yeah. It'll be fun to watch them. Happy for those guys. Still got a lot of friends there.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking out a few minutes. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, CJ and I are going to start making our picks. Start off in the Midwest. Perhaps the most dangerous 12 seed is New Mexico State. Rhode Island, also a dangerous team. Will either of us have those teams moving on? That's next. This is OSU Student Radio. This is the Border Battle on KXZY.